Deep within the ancient Egyptian embalming chambers, embalmers performed acts that went far beyond preserving the dead. Historical papyri reveal disturbing accounts of intimate violations during mummification. The process wasn't merely about preservation. It involved ritualistic touching and manipulation of bodies in ways that blur the line between sacred duty and disturbing obsession. Archaeological evidence suggests that certain embalmers developed unhealthy fixations with the deceased. The Edwin Smith Papyrus hints at procedures that served no medical purpose but fulfilled darker desires. Bodies were kept for extended periods, far longer than necessary, while embalmers performed mysterious nighttime rituals behind closed doors. The most shocking discovery came from tomb inscriptions describing the final intimacy, a ritualistic practice where embalmers would position bodies in compromising poses before wrapping. Herodotus documented accounts of embalmers who were caught engaging in necrophilic acts, leading to strict regulations requiring immediate processing of attractive female corpses. But this was only the beginning of Egypt's disturbing intimate customs. Royal burial chambers reveal evidence of the most disturbing pharaonic tradition, ceremonial consummation with deceased royal lives. Hieroglyphic texts from the tomb of Amenhotep III described rituals where the living pharaoh would spend 3 nights alone with his mummified queen, performing sacred acts believed to ensure her successful journey to the afterlife. These ceremonies weren't symbolic. Archaeological analysis of royal mummies shows physical evidence of post-mortem manipulation. The mummy of Queen Ankhesenamun bears signs of ritualistic positioning that occurred after death but before final wrapping. Pharaohs believed that intimate contact with the dead would transfer divine power and ensure eternal rule. The practice reached its most horrific extremes during the reign of Akhenaten. Historical accounts describe how he kept the mummified remains of his daughters in his private chambers for months, claiming divine visions instructed him to perform nightly rituals with their bodies. Courtiers reported disturbing sounds emanating from the royal quarters, moaning, chanting, and the rustling of ancient linens. Hidden within temple walls, priests conducted intimate rituals that would shock modern sensibility. The Temple of Hathor housed sacred prostitutes, both male and female, who performed sexual acts as religious ceremonies. But these weren't ordinary encounters. Papyrus records describe ritualistic practices involving animal masks, sacred oils made from human remains, and acts performed while participants consumed hallucinogenic substances. The most disturbing temple practice involved prepubescent children chosen as sacred vessels. These children underwent ritualistic defloration ceremonies before being sacrificed to ensure fertile harvests. Archaeological excavations at Dendera revealed chambers beneath the temple containing the remains of dozens of young children, their bodies arranged in ritualistic positions that suggest intimate violations occurred before death. Priests justified these acts as necessary communications with the gods. The pyramid texts contain coded references to divine coupling with young initiates, describing in graphic detail how priests would unite with children to channel divine energy. Survivors of these rituals, if they lived, were sworn to secrecy under penalty of being buried alive. The goddess Hathor was believed to demand the most innocent offerings. Papyrus fragments describe ceremonies where children as young as 7 were brought to secret chambers beneath temples. There, high priests would perform acts of sacred intimacy while chanting incantations, believing this would ensure the gods' favor for the coming year. Egyptian royalty practiced incest on a scale that defied biological safety, driven by religious beliefs and political necessity. But beyond simple brother-sister marriages lay darker practices that historians have struggled to document fully. Royal papyri reveal that pharaohs often maintained intimate relationships with multiple family members simultaneously, creating complex webs of dysfunction within royal households. Cleopatra VII's lineage exemplifies this horror. For over 300 years, the Ptolemaic dynasty practiced such intense inbreeding that genetic analysis reveals some pharaohs were more inbred than children of identical twins. but the psychological damage manifested in disturbing ways. Palace records describe Ptolemaic rulers who developed sexual obsessions with family members' corpses, keeping mummified relatives in private chambers for intimate encounters. The most documented case involves Ptolemy VIII, who reportedly maintained sexual relationships with his sister wife, his daughter, and his mother simultaneously. Court physicians recorded his descent into madness, describing episodes where he would violate family members' mummies while believing he was communicating with gods. His reign became synonymous with sexual terror, as he reportedly forced noble families to offer their children for his mad divine pleasure. Ramesses II took royal incest to unprecedented extremes. Archaeological evidence suggests he fathered children with at least 6 of his own daughters. But palace inscriptions hint at even darker practices. Ritualistic ceremonies where he would consecrate new wives by first having intimate relations with their mothers and sisters, believing this created divine bloodlines. The famous opening of the mouth ceremony contained elements so disturbing that most Egyptologists avoid discussing them publicly. This wasn't merely a ritualistic blessing for the dead. It involved literal, intimate contact with corpses that crossed every boundary of human decency. High priests would perform the ceremony naked, using golden implements shaped like phalluses to awaken the deceased. But historical accounts reveal the ritual went far beyond symbolic touching. The coffin texts contain explicit descriptions of priests inserting sacred objects into bodily orifices of mummies, believing this would restore the soul's ability to experience pleasure in the afterlife. The most horrific aspect involved the breath of life ritual, where priests would place their mouths over various openings in the mummy and exhale while manipulating the body. Papyrus records describe priests becoming sexually aroused during these ceremonies, leading to acts of necrophilia justified as religious duty. Some mummies show evidence of post-mortem violations that occurred during these supposed sacred rituals. Female mummies received particularly disturbing treatment. The goddess awakening ceremony required priests to stimulate the deceased's intimate areas while chanting incantations. Archaeological analysis reveals that many female mummies were violated during this process, with physical evidence suggesting multiple perpetrators participated in these sacred acts. The removal and preservation of organs involved more than medical necessity. It became a fetishistic obsession for many priests. Canopic jars weren't simply storage containers, but objects of intimate worship that involved disturbing rituals with human or the full-felled kins. The head was always free. Embalmers developed sexual fixations with specific organs, particularly reproductive organs, which were preserved separately in special chambers. The liver, believed to control lust, was treated with particular reverence. Priests would perform ritualistic acts with these organs, including consuming them in sacred ceremonies designed to absorb the deceased's sexual energy. The most disturbing practice involved the communion of essence, rituals where priests would manipulate preserved sexual organs while in various states of arousal, believing this would grant them supernatural virility. Archaeological evidence from embalming facilities reveals chambers specifically designed for these organ worship ceremonies, complete with beds and intimate implements. Brain removal, typically performed through nasal passages, became an opportunity for particularly disturbed embalmers to commit acts of violation. Historical accounts describe embalmers who developed obsessions with the process, prolonging it unnecessarily while engaging in inappropriate contact with the corpse's head and facial orifices. Temple complexes housed elaborate networks of sacred prostitutes who participated in rituals designed to channel divine energy through sexual acts. But these weren't consensual religious practices. They involved coercion, drugs, and ritualistic abuse that left participants psychologically shattered. The Temple of Amun-Ra at Karnak maintained quarters for over 400 sacred prostitutes, including children as young as 10 years old. These individuals were drugged with powerful hallucinogens and forced to participate in group rituals where multiple priests would engage with them simultaneously while claiming divine possession. In the Second Papacy Aegean Y, Survivors' accounts, recorded on private papyri, describe experiences of terror and trauma masked as religious ecstasy. The divine marriage ceremonies represented the pinnacle of these horrific practices. During major festivals, high priests would select the most attractive temple prostitutes for ritualistic gang violations performed in front of crowds of worshippers. These acts were believed to ensure divine favor, but they destroyed the mental and physical health of participants, who were discarded once they became too damaged to continue. Children born from these encounters were considered especially sacred and subjected to even more disturbing rituals. They were raised within temple walls and trained from infancy to participate in sexual ceremonies. By adolescence, many showed signs of severe psychological trauma, leading to high suicide rates among this population. The said festival, supposedly celebrating pharaonic renewal, contained secret ceremonies that involve mass sexual rituals designed to transfer the king's virility to the kingdom. These weren't symbolic celebrations but literal orgies involving hundreds of participants, including unwilling slaves and prisoners. And pharaohs would demonstrate their renewed vigor through public sexual acts with multiple partners, including family members, slaves, and sacred animals. The festival's climax involved the king engaging in ritualistic violations of prisoners condemned to death, believing their life force would transfer to him through intimate contact during their final moments. Archaeological evidence from festival sites reveals chambers designed specifically for these group rituals, complete with restraint devices and ceremonial implements used for sexual torture. Hieroglyphic accounts describe prisoners being forced to participate in degrading acts before execution, their screams interpreted as offerings to the gods. The most disturbing said festival tradition involved child participants selected from noble families. These children were forced to witness and sometimes participate in the sexual ceremonies, supposedly preparing them for adult religious responsibilities. Many never recovered from the trauma, leading to a generation of psychologically damaged nobility. Egyptian beliefs about the afterlife included disturbing concepts about eternal sexual activity that influenced how they prepared bodies for death. The field of reeds wasn't just a paradise. It was envisioned as a realm of infinite sexual pleasure, leading to preparation rituals that violated every concept of human dignity. Mummies were equipped with artificial sexual organs crafted from precious metals and wood, designed to ensure eternal pleasure in the afterlife. But the installation of these devices involved intimate manipulation of corpses that went far beyond medical necessity. Embalmers developed fetishistic obsessions with this process, prolonging it while engaging in inappropriate contact with the deceased. Female mummies received particularly elaborate sexual preparation. Their bodies were positioned and manipulated to simulate arousal, with artificial devices inserted to maintain these poses throughout eternity. Some mummies show evidence of extensive post-mortem violation during this preparation, suggesting embalmers used the process to satisfy their own desires. The wealthy paid extra for enhanced afterlife preparation, services that involved extensive intimate manipulation of corpses under the guise of ensuring sexual satisfaction in eternity. These procedures had no religious basis, but allowed disturbed embalmers to commit acts of necrophilia while charging premium fees. The Book of the Dead contains passages describing sexual encounters the deceased would experience in the afterlife, but these texts also served as instruction manuals for living priests who used them to justify intimate violations of corpses and living participants in death preparation rituals. Spell 125 describes the weighing of the heart ceremony, but hidden versions contain explicit instructions for sexual rituals priests were expected to perform with the deceased's body before burial. These rituals supposedly ensured the soul's sexual vitality in the afterlife, but were really opportunities for necrophilic acts, justified through religious authority. The negative confessions include statements about sexual purity but priest training manuals reveal these were used to identify individuals with sexual experience for special treatment during mummification. Virgins received different preparation procedures that involved intimate violations, supposedly designed to prepare them for afterlife encounters with gods. Private papyri reveal that wealthy families could purchase enhanced afterlife services that involved priests performing sexual rituals with the deceased to ensure their satisfaction in eternity. These services had no basis in religious doctrine, but provided cover for systematic necrophilia within the funeral industry. Tomb robbing wasn't just about stealing treasures. It involved systematic violation of mummified remains that continued the cycle of abuse even after burial. Robbers developed specific techniques for accessing mummies' intimate areas, seeking amulets and valuables, while committing acts of necrophilia. Archaeological evidence reveals that many tombs were repeatedly violated over centuries, with mummies showing signs of sexual assault from multiple time periods. Robbers would often spend extended time with corpses, treating them as objects for sexual gratification while searching for valuables. The most disturbing discoveries involve tomb chambers converted into temporary brothels, where robbers would bring mummies to secluded locations for extended sessions of violation. These sites contain evidence of group activities, suggesting organized networks of individuals who shared disturbing interests in corpse manipulation. Female mummies were particularly targeted, with many showing evidence of violent post-mortem assault. Some were partially unwrapped and repositioned in suggestive poses, indicating robbers returned repeatedly to the same corpses for ongoing violations. The practice became so common that tomb designers began including false burial chambers to protect actual remains from desecration. Now, contemporary Egyptologists have systematically hidden evidence of ancient Egypt's most disturbing intimate practices, fearing damage to Egypt's tourist industry and academic reputations. Museums worldwide store artifacts and documentation that would revolutionize our understanding of ancient Egyptian sexuality, but institutional pressures keep these discoveries from public view. Papyri, containing explicit accounts of necrophilic rituals, remain untranslated in museum archives, classified as too sensitive for academic publication. Photographs of mummies showing evidence of post-mortem violation are restricted to senior researchers who sign confidentiality agreements. The true scope of ancient Egypt's sexual perversions remains hidden behind academic respectability. Archaeological sites continue yielding evidence of systematic sexual abuse within ancient Egyptian religious institutions, but funding organizations pressure researchers to focus on culturally appropriate discoveries. Teams excavating temple complexes have uncovered chambers clearly designed for sexual torture and ritual abuse, but these findings are catalogued as religious ceremonial spaces in official reports. The cover-up extends to international museums, where Egyptian government pressure has led to the removal of artifacts and displays that might suggest inappropriate sexual practices in ancient times. Visitors see sanitized versions of Egyptian history, while the most disturbing evidence remains locked in storage facilities, accessible only to elite researchers who maintain the conspiracy of silence. The intimate practices of ancient Egypt created psychological trauma that echoed through generations, influencing cultural development in ways historians are only beginning to understand. The normalization of necrophilia, child sexual abuse, and ritualistic violation within religious contexts established patterns of sexual dysfunction that persisted long after the pharaoh's fall. Evidence suggests these practices continued in modified forms through the Roman period and beyond, influencing early Christian monasticism and Islamic mysticism in ways scholars refuse to acknowledge. That the second practice is all about individual battles and countless evidence wherever they can find. The psychological damage inflicted by Egyptian sexual rituals created cultural trauma that shaped Mediterranean civilizations for millennia. Modern Egypt's reluctance to confront this history stems from more than tourism concerns. It reflects ongoing cultural shame about practices that violated human dignity on an unprecedented scale. The ancient Egyptians weren't just advanced in architecture and medicine, they were pioneers in systematic sexual abuse disguised as religious duty. Understanding these practices provides crucial insight into how religious authority can be weaponized to justify the most horrific violations of human dignity. Ancient Egypt's legacy isn't just pyramids and pharaohs. It's a cautionary tale about the dangerous intersection of power, religion, and sexual deviance that continues to manifest in modern religious institutions worldwide. The most horrific intimate practices of ancient Egypt weren't aberrations. They were systematic expressions of a culture that valued power over human dignity, using religious authority to justify acts that destroyed countless lives across millennia. Their true legacy lies not in monuments of stone, but in the psychological trauma that echoes through history, reminding us that civilization's greatest achievements can mask humanity's darkest impulses.